is that like I had gone through failures before. And so I tried to use those lessons as a way to cope with everything else.
I'm going to start with you the way I start with all our interviews. Let's go back to you as a youth, and what were sports and what did they look like for you?
Yeah, so I began playing sports back when I was about 5 or 6. My main sport was soccer. I played soccer all the way up through high school. I did have some collegiate aspirations, but my senior year I broke my ankle, so I just kind of quit the sports side of things and just tried to focus more on the school side of things. But growing up, I played almost every sport that I could play. Both of my parents grew up playing sports. And so they truly believed in all of the good things that sports has to offer. So yes, sir.
So, yeah. So I think there's a lot of things with sports that that you can tell sometimes, like I see it a lot in my 4th grade classroom, that there's you could tell this kid, this boy or this girl has probably never played sports. Cause it's just there's just stuff that happens. Just I think if you played sports, you would get kind of used to it. You kind of agree with that? Do you see that just in daily life? I mean, you're a high school teacher. So do you see that sometimes or one of your students have never played a sport and you're you can kind of tell?
Yeah. I mean, I think that with sports, you learn a lot when it comes to life. You learn how to fail, and you learn that failing's okay. Because I always grew up with the saying that there's always someone better than you are. And that whether it's your job or if it's sports or anything that you do in your life, that you always want to do it the best you can. So I do think that, yes, that you can definitely tell. And the kids that aren't around sports a lot, just because of the way that they handle things. But on the other side, you can definitely tell that your athletes, they know how to handle certain things, and they know how to handle when things don't go their way. And so I do believe that there is a correlation there, and that sports do help children, kids, young adults learn how to deal with life.
So I want to stick with you being younger for a second, but you said something that makes me want to jump ahead for a minute. So you mentioned something about athletes and you could tell that they deal with stuff when it doesn't go your way, right? So what I see a lot in 4th grade that there's kids that they play sports, right? And they're good at sports and people have told them they're good at sports. But when they lose or something happens in school, not even to do sports related, but they're doing something at school and it doesn't go their way, they kind of have a meltdown. And I'm going to ask you this question. I think that there's a big difference between somebody who's good at sports and is an athlete and then somebody who's a student athlete. I think that when you talk about who represents your school, whether it's middle school, high school, at the college levels, the next level, I think you think student athlete, it's they don't have those easy meltdowns in a class project like somebody who's just an athlete? Do you feel the
I
same way
agree.
about that?
Yes, sir. Yeah, because I mean, like, I think it is a lot harder to be a student athlete, right? Because like you're having to balance so much more. Um, and like here at Cherryville High School, we have a no failure policy. So our athletes cannot fail a class, whereas at other schools they can. And so we definitely hold our kids to a higher level. Um, and I think a lot of that is because that we realize that for the majority of our kids, high school sports is the end of the road there. And that we want to make sure that our kids are ready to be out in the real world, and that they can find a job, they can keep a job, and all that. So yes, sir.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you that, and we're gonna get to all that about like developing kids for the future. Let's go back to you as a kid though. So you talked about you played every sport. Your parents were kind of behind you with the idea that there's a lot of good that comes out of sports. Besides soccer, because you had mentioned soccer was your big thing, and we'll get to that. But was there anything else that like you felt like you excelled at, and like this is my sport?
Yeah. So I was a pretty good wrestler. So I'm from Virginia. So I wrestled, or I didn't begin to wrestle truly until I got to high school. And that was a sport that my dad wanted me to try, because he really liked the idea that when you're wrestling, you have no one else to blame but yourself, right?
Yep.
So I had to carry that. Like, if I lost, then that was on me. If I did well, that was on me. And so wrestling was definitely a sport that, like, going into that, I would not have thought that I would have enjoyed it, but it honestly became one of my favorite sports. But I also played lacrosse, played football, ran track. So all of those sports too.
Where are you from that you played lacrosse? Are you from here?
I'm from Virginia.
Okay. That makes sense. So yeah, that's one of the lacrosse things. Like, I very
Yes.
rarely do I ever hear anybody
Yes.
in North Carolina talk about lacrosse.
Right.
All right. So why did you think that wrestling wouldn't be your thing? Was it because it's a solo thing and not so much of a team sport?
Yeah. So, like, growing up as a child, like, every sport I played was a team sport. And like, I love team sports. Like, I love the camaraderie. I love just being with everybody. Which wrestling is that same way. But like, I just never really grew up like loving wrestling. I had friends that did, but wrestling was just never one of those sports that I was like, I want to go do that. Um, and it took me 2 years to really love it. But once I did love it, it was one of those sports that I hated having to leave it.
So it's funny you say that about wrestling. So like, I swam in high school, and one of the reasons why
Okay.
I liked swimming was the fact of everything you described earlier about wrestling. It's solo. It's 100% on you. Your failures are on you. Your accolades are on you. And that was it was just weird for me because like, I grew up, like, I have half brothers and half sisters, but I never like grew up with anybody in my house, like, when I was younger. So like, I felt like I was kind of always like, I gravitated towards the idea of like, I didn't have to be part of a team. So it was just, I was
Right.
just interested to hear like what your thoughts on like why all of a sudden you didn't think you were gonna like wrestling and then you turned into it. All right, so we get to high school now. You're obviously in wrestling. You got the soccer thing going on as well. You mentioned that you break your ankle. Let's go back to prior before you breaking your ankle. You said the collegiate aspiration idea. You wanted to go to college. You wanted to play soccer, obviously, at the next level. How big of a blow was that to you when you broke your ankle?
It was big. Because I mean, like up until that point, like I had some offers to go play soccer. I had some offers to go wrestle. And so like I was pretty dead set on like, hey, I'm gonna go somewhere to play sports. Like I had spent my whole life trying to get to that point. And then within 10 seconds, all of that's gone. And so that was something really hard to try to deal with. Even at that age, especially when you see some of your good friends sign offers to go somewhere and all you can think about is like, hey, that should be me too. And so, so, I mean, it was hard, but I also think that's where the sports aspect came into play is that like I had gone through failures before. And so I tried to use those lessons as a way to cope with everything else.
So when the injury happens and you realize, all right, soccer's probably not going to happen for you collegiately. And you had mentioned at that point, you started to talk about studies, which I'm assuming you're talking about your high school studies and your grades there.
Yes.
What was the goal then? Like, or how long does it take you to like come up with a goal?
Well, I mean, I think at that point I had to come up with a goal pretty quickly. In the beginning, the goal was, is there any way that I could go to school to play sports still? Right. Could I go to the next level? And that pretty quickly turned into a no. I ended up having surgery on my ankle. I have 7 screws in a plate. I think I was out for 3 months. And so at that point, that's a long enough time where schools have gone on to someone else, right? So then it just turned into what can I do academically to get into the best school that I can go to, basically. And I ended up going to Gardner-Webb University down here. So, yes, sir.
Awesome. So then at what point do you decide that education's the route you're going to go? And then obviously at some point that takes you to lead to the path of coaching, but like what made you get into education?
Yeah. So my college academic career was pretty wild. In the beginning, I wanted to be an athletic trainer. And I quickly realized that like, hey, like I really don't want to spend all of that time, right? Like they had long hours and that just was not on my plate right then. And so then I began to think about like, what field do I really like a lot? And that was education. And I realized that like education was the field where I would have the biggest impact on lives.
So
yes.
now you become a teacher, you get into the classroom. Did you start in the high school? Like, is that the first route you went through high school? Okay.
Yep. Yes.
Which bless your soul with that one, pal. I could never. I couldn't do that. People always ask, because I teach fourth grade. People always ask, like, "Oh, would you consider middle school or high school?" I'm like, middle school, if there'd have to be a lot of bargaining there. I can't, like, I don't know. It takes a special person to do that. So you get to high school, right? And you get to high school as a teacher now, and you start teaching. How long into your teaching career did it take you to get into the coaching realm?
I coached right off the bat. I took my teaching job and I took a coaching job with it. And so, I mean, I've been coaching for the past 7 years. That's as
Awesome.
long as I've been teaching.
So what's the crossover that you see with like lessons in the classroom versus, and we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but like then what you see like in the sports world? Like, do you ever find yourself in that weird thing, like when you're in the classroom and you maybe make like not an offhanded comment, but like you make a comment and then you realize like, all right, I'm not on the field, but at the same time, like this is a good like coachable or teachable moment?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like there's definitely been times where like, let's just say that one of my classes isn't doing something that I want them to do, or they just can't grasp the concept, right? It's been times where I've had to catch myself like, don't go back to the coaching aspect of it. Like, you have to be able to separate the two, right? And then also being in such a small school, like a lot of the athletes that I coach are also in my classroom. So to some extent, you have to be able to separate that too. And say from 8:30 to 3 o'clock, they're here for school. And then after that, they're here for sports. So I have definitely caught myself trying to find that balance. But I will say, like, being a coach does prepare you in being able to teach too, because you deal with a lot of the same things on the field as you do in the classroom. I treat my classroom like a practice, right? And if you come into practice with a plan, and then practice is going to run smoothly. If you come into your classroom with a plan, and then class is going to run smoothly. And there is a lot of crossover there too.
So it's interesting that you brought that up. So like I always tell my kids in class that like one of the big things is like you practice how you're going to do something like in a game. And then in our situation, like I always tell the kids in like my classroom is it's like all week, like when we're practicing for a test. You know, this is what like when we're learning a standard or we're learning something we're working on, we're practicing for that test. And then so it's like I always tell them like, you know, it's like show, because I teach math. It's like show your work, do this, do that. And I'm like, even if you're messing around right now on the board, I still want you to do it the same way you're going to do it on the test, because if you don't, then you're not going to do it on the test, because it's like if you're not practicing it that way, it's not going to translate to you the game day, or in our situation, a test. So it's just interesting to bring it up that way, because it's like that's the coaching thing that like comes out like, and I don't always hear other people say this. Academically, do you think there's something with athletes and playing sports that connects to kids doing better in the classroom academically?
I would say yes and no to that. I definitely think that like academics gives athletes a way to play sports, you know?
Yep.
But at the same time, I definitely think that you have those athletes that are here solely to play sports. So the academic side kind of falls to the side there. And then like here, that would then mean that you don't get to play sports. So I do think that like that privilege of being able to play sports does let's see, what's the right word? I would say that it does allow for maybe some of those kids that aren't great in school to want to do better, because all they want is to play sports. So it does help that process out some.
Well, it's kind of like, I mean, especially like the way you just kind of described it, it's really like incentives, it's like, so in fourth grade, a lot of the stuff is, with 9 and 10-year-olds is like, you got to come up with an incentive. It's like, all right, you have X amount of good days, you get this, like we do dojo points. So it's like they get a party at the end of the thing. But in your situation, the girls that you coach, it's like, or even just other athletes in the school that are playing other sports, it's like the incentive for them is you do well on this test or you do well in this class, you're going to get to play Thursday night. If you don't, then you don't get to play Thursday or Friday night.
Right.
What is something that you do in your classroom as a teacher that you think the reason you do it is because you're a coach and it would be beneficial for another teacher to do something like that?
Let's see. That's a tough one. Because I'm not going to sit here and say that like I'm a great teacher, because there's a lot that I can do to be better. But like one thing that I really try to do in the classroom that I do a lot out on the field is I try to build relationships. Like I try to truly know my players. When I see them in the hallways, like I always speak to them. I always say their name. Like I want them to see that I treat them with respect. And I think the same can be applied to the classroom. And that every kid has a background, right? And you might not know that background, but if you just have a conversation with them, if you treat them with some respect, if you just really try to build that relationship, I think that in turn is going to entice them to want to do better in the classroom, because they don't see you as a teacher now, and they see you as someone that cares about them and cares about their future.
What's a moment? I know this is always like a weird question to ask because it's like it's hard sometimes for people to answer. But like, what is a moment in your career so far as a teacher and then / coach that you saw a kid excel because of something you did?
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to answer that was this first year of me coaching girls soccer here. Prior to our first win this year, they had lost 30 games in a row. And so they had spent 2 seasons and just not knowing what it felt like to win. And so after we won that first game, we went on to win 3 more games back to back to back. And so seeing their confidence just rise, seeing them being able to carry themselves with some pride, it was really a big deal, because I came from Crest High School where like winning was the expectation, right? Yeah. And so everyone won, and winning really, it was a big deal, but it wasn't, right? Because like that was what you were supposed to do. And so here, like winning really when it comes to girls soccer, like winning was a great thing, but like it was like, okay, if you don't win, then that's okay, right? And so seeing them win and seeing that joy on their face and seeing the impact that had on them was a really big deal to me.
So you mentioned coaching at Crest. So I spent 2 seasons doing play-by-play broadcasts for Kings Mountain. So I cruised around all of Cleveland County doing football, right? So I'm originally from New York. I moved here 15 years ago. So I know how big football is in North Carolina. I know it's not Texas big, but when you cruise out to Cleveland County, it's pretty close. Like, I mean, you're getting close to Texas big. And you mentioned Crest because Crest, Shelby, Kings Mountain, like that's such a big like rivalry and a big deal out there. And you mentioned the winning because like the way you said it, I was almost going to say to you, it's like, winning on a Friday night, it's just another Friday night. Like it's not like, it's you didn't impress anybody, like you impress other people who don't know anything about it, but like to Crest people, it doesn't impress them. Was it weird for you to like leave that dynamic, go to Cherryville High School where you're at? You mentioned the program hadn't won in X amount of games. I think you said 30 plus games. And like you get there and like, is that just like a weird dynamic to like kind of a role to fall into?
It was weird to begin with. Yes. And I think a lot of that just came from like, I was just used to things being done a specific way. But the great thing here was like now I get the chance to truly build a program, and I get the chance to have that program be what I want it to be. And because of that, like I don't want to leave the program in a bad way, right? Because I want to, whenever I'm done here, like I want to be able and to walk out those doors and say, I'm going to leave this program in a good place. With that being said, we have great people here and we have great coaches here. The AD here has done a great job too. So as a coach, being in that spot, there has been a lot of positive support there too.
So let's do a little rapid fire. We'll knock out some questions. Just first thing that comes to the top of your dome, just throw it out there. Favorite sports movie?
Remember the Titans.
Oh, good one. I just watched that the other night. Actually, I had this weird thing where I was like, oh, let me go watch Remember the Titans. It took me 2 nights, obviously, because I got to go to bed early now. If you could coach any professional team, what would it be?
DC United.
Why? Team. Yes, I know. Yeah. Why DC United?
When I was in, let's say the 6th grade, I did like a school project there. And I got to do like all of like the on field behind the scenes kind of things during one of their games.
Awesome. Sweet. Do you have a go-to mantra or quote that you kind of live by?
I mean, I would say the quote that I live by, which is one that I've already said, is that there's always someone better than you are.
Is there an athlete to you that's the most inspiring?
I would say Tiger Woods.
Oh, that's a good one. Nobody said Tiger Woods yet. That's a good one. What's, as far as pregame rituals, let's go back to your soccer days when you were playing soccer. There's got to be something that you had to either ate every time or did all the time. What was a ritual for you?
Mine was before anyone else got out onto the field, I would always walk around the field, and I would always spend some time by myself out there, just trying to get ready for the game.
Do you still do that now as a coach, or do you do any kind of variation of that now as a coach?
Somewhat. Like now it's more I'll go out there by myself and I'll paint the field. And to always have people ask me like, do you want help? And I usually will say no, because that's usually my time to get ready and to just let everything else go.
Where do you feel like the majority of your coaching comes into play? Is it during practice, or is it in game time situations? Like if you had to say like 95% of your coaching takes place here, where does it happen?
I would say during practice. I'm the type of coach where I want it to be like by the time we get to the games, you know what to do. And I shouldn't have to tell you where to be or what pass to make. And that is really the time for the athletes to shine. I don't believe that's my time to shine. They are the ones playing. So ideally, I want the majority of my coaching to happen throughout practice.
What advice do you have for aspiring coaches or teachers coming up? Like, what would you give them as advice?
I think the best advice I would give them is to not quit. I think in today's age, coaching and teaching is hard, because like now you're not only having to really handle the kids, but you're also having to deal with parents too.
Yep.
Because like even in the past 7 years, like I have seen that the relationship between the parents and the coaches has begun to change, right? That I've run into some moms and dads who don't necessarily see me as a coach, and they see themselves as a coach. So to not let those hard times get in the way of the good times. Because like if you can work past those hard times, then good things are going to come. But it does take some time.
Is it hard for you, like, to separate the parents you mentioned that think like there's always like it doesn't matter what sport, whether it's soccer, swimming, football, basketball, whatever, there's always like the one parent who thinks like their kid is like, in the example of soccer, they're the next Pele, or they're the next I'm drawing a blank right now, like, Neymar, like they're the next like star soccer player, or like in basketball, they're the next LeBron James, in football, they're the next Cam Newton. Like, so do you find it hard, like, to deal with those parents sometimes? And like, I guess they're like, where do you draw the line in the sand? Like, how do you like separate that? So like, they know like, all right, I'm the coach, you're the parent on the sideline.
Right. So I personally don't find it hard, simply because like I'm around their kid all the time. Like I see their kids in school. I see how their child performs at practice. So like I know that like, hey, and your child is good, but they're not that good, right? So I just can bring in a different perspective there. At the same time, though, I mean, like I don't really blame the parents, because I mean, I do think that the parents are coming from a good place, and they want their child to succeed. But it's not necessarily hard for me. Where I draw the line is I have a policy where I call it the 24-hour rule, where after any game, like I don't speak to parents and for 24 hours. And I've usually found that helps because like tempers are typically higher right after some game. Whereas if you wait some time, then parents have some time to reflect on things.
As a high school coach, because it's like you're in a weird spot because it's like you coach high school students who are like trying to be, with the goals of being college athletes eventually, but at the same time they're high school students. How much do you deal with, and I don't mean deal like in a negative way, but like how much do you deal with parents, or is there more ownership on like the student athletes and it's more of your communication between the certain girls that play for you versus you're actually talking to their parents all the time?
I think it depends on the sport, honestly. Like with soccer, I haven't had to deal with any parents. And that has been great. And like, I don't know if that's because of the expectation or just the culture that was built where like everyone is just happy to be out there. But I also coached the offensive line for the football team. And there I have had to deal with some parents. So I do think that a lot of that does depend on the sport.
So when we started this, we talked about your initial goal was you wanted to play college soccer, you wanted to be a soccer star. Then that translated into you wanted to become a teacher. What's the goal now for Coach Manning? Like, what do you see happening, either next 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is? What's the goal now for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think my goal now is to build the best program that I can build here. And I want my players to come back 10 years from now and be able to talk about how great it was to play here. I want to be able to see them wherever and they remember who I am. And the goal now is to just have the biggest impact that I can on these young lives.